My name is Nigel. I'm the artistic director of Tenebrae. Tonight's concert is with just a handful of singers, the young cohort in the team. Normally we're about 20 singers. Tonight we've got 5 others with us. They're called associate artists, and we sort of audition the best and brightest young talent from London. And then those lucky ones, I think I call them lucky, maybe they don't. They come and join us for a whole year, and they all our recordings, all our tours, all the projects that we're involved with, educational stuff, and then when we come up with different programs like tonight, when they're sort of light music, or we've just recorded another program with saxophone, they sort of get brought in and they're asked to sing everything with us, so you'll get to meet them and hear them later. There is nobody to sort of do an interview as such this evening, so you're kind of in my hands. Although it might be, I don't really know what you want to hear about. I could talk for days about something that you're not at all interested in. So I wonder if anybody's got any kind of burning questions that might just sort of get the ball rolling. Either, how Tenebrae started, or anything about the program tonight, or I don't know, if you can think of something. Otherwise, I'll just bat on. So do please put your hand up if you've got something, and then I'll reread the question, or please.
Yeah, we've heard you a number of times over the years, and you seem to have broadened your programming from what we heard originally. So how has that developed, and what's your strategy or your process here for programming?
So the question is about how this gentleman has been to every concert we've ever done, and we've developed our programs from the early days and sort of gone into different styles. What's the process for all that? I mean, the reason I do it is essentially it's out of necessity. There are lots of festivals and promoters that want the name Tenebrae, but then if we want to go with 20 singers, they might not want to hear a program of Poulenc or Joby Talbot's Path of Miracles, and so often they can't afford the whole group. They want a smaller part of the group, and if they don't want Renaissance music or early music, then we have to come up with other things. So it's partly out of necessity, but it's also largely to do with my own kind of eclectic taste in music. When I was a singer, when I was a countertenor many years ago, I sang in a group that specialised in Renaissance music, the Tallis Scholars, but I always enjoyed close harmony. So I was always a fan, from the age of 12, of the King singers and all their kind of repertoire. But also when I was singing in Westminster Cathedral Choir, Westminster Abbey Choir, we'd be doing much later and contemporary repertoire, 20th century stuff. And it didn't really matter what I was singing. I really enjoyed it, even the medieval stuff, sort of Peritan. So there's always something for me to find and to enjoy. And when I started Tenebrae, I wanted to have a choir that would focus a little bit more on concert presentation, rather than a choir that walks on for 40 minutes, takes a bow, walks off, have the interval, come back and do exactly the same. So interesting, that's what we're doing tonight. I wanted to develop a concert presentation, because when I was a kid, when I was a chorister, my favourite services of the year were in Advent and Holy Week, when we'd be singing by candlelight in our 13th century church, and we would be moving around, and those were the ones where the congregation and the choir were sort of really excited, and I thought it'd be quite interesting to see, certainly seeing as we sing in lots of cathedrals and abbeys and so forth, if we could come up with a concert program where you could create the same kind of tension, frisson, if you like, but also it gives everybody, the people at the front get a completely different perspective. If you start from the back and then you work your way to the stage, and vice versa if you're sitting at the back, basically means that nobody can get away without having their ears blasted at some point by the whole group coming rather close to them. And it's worked very well for us. I think it sort of allows another degree of drama if you like, in the presentation. And we commissioned a piece by Joby Talbot called The Path of Miracles, and the brief was really to come up with something that gave the choir a reason to move around a venue, rather than saying, look, we'll just start at the back of the church singing some Gibbons and then move around and whatever. Actually have a piece of music that requires the singers to separate and whatever. And of course, the pilgrimage route to Santiago was the perfect kind of excuse. So there are 4 movements, each in 4 stages of the pilgrimage route: Roncesvalles, Burgos, Leon, and then Santiago itself. And at some point, the whole choir sort of just picks up its music and walks whilst it's singing. And so, that's kind of a physical pilgrimage, if you like. And at the end, all the choir just sort of slowly scatter, going back to their home, sort of kind of reflecting what pilgrims would have done. And that was a fascinating kind of journey, and that worked so well that we sort of try to recreate it a little bit whenever we possibly can. Sometimes, programs don't really lend themselves to it. I only ever do it if it enhances the music and enhances the experience of the listener. So when we do, for example, Brahms and Bruckner, we sang in St George's Chapel, Windsor, about 3 weeks ago. I suppose it's also owing to COVID restrictions. They didn't want the choir singing, choral singing is lethal, very dangerous. And so we were sort of told to just stay at one end, stay on the stage, and don't go near the audience. So we were, that doesn't lend itself, though. You need to be in situ with the choir, sort of able to communicate with itself and hear each other all the time. But yeah, it's my eclectic taste. When we first started, actually, back 20 years ago, the choir started almost by accident. I'd given up singing. I left the King Singers at the end of the year 2000. And I'd sung sort of almost every day since the age of 7, as a chorister. And by this stage, nearly 30 years later, I was ready for a break. My voice was certainly ready for a break. And I decided just to get away from it and actually try and find something else to do altogether. I went off to Switzerland, ostensibly to learn how to ski properly. So I ran a chalet. So I was going to do that for a ski season, and then I'd sort of, find another job, another career or something. When I was there, in this little lovely town called Villars-sur-Glâne, one of the local residents was none other than Valerie Schulte, Sir George Schulte's widow. And I got to know her via the people I lived next door to. And one day she said, I've just been into Geneva and met the senior pastor who was asking me if I knew anybody that could give him a Christmas concert, because some choir had just pulled out of giving them a concert. And she said, you do that kind of thing. You could do that, couldn't you? And I said, well, I could, but, all the people I know are professional musicians. And she sort of, waved of her hand and said, oh, they'll pay you a fee, they'll pay you a fee. So I thought, well, okay, we'll look into it. And I asked some of my friends, what would they like as a fee? And you have to pay their flights, their hotels, you have to give them per diems. All these kind of things, I hadn't really thought of. And the senior pastor at Geneva Cathedral said, okay, yes, we'll pay this. Can we have a recording and hear what the choir sounds like? And what's the choir called? The choir's called Tenebrae. And there was no choir. It just sort of it came out of nowhere. Tenebrae was the name of the office in Holy Week, where you sing by candlelight, and all the candles are extinguished. You go to darkness. And I'd done a concert with a few singers from Westminster Cathedral, with James Bowman, the countertenor. It was before I joined the King Singers, and we called it Tenebrae, and it was the only thing I could think of. And so when they asked the name, and they said, can we have a recording? We're paying all this music. And I said, yeah, sure, I'll get something for you. And I got on the phone back in England to all my friends and said, look, could you spend a day sort of getting together and just sing through some Christmas stuff. And we did. I sent the recording and they said, okay, fine. And then the senior pastor got in touch again and said, look, Lausanne Cathedral would actually like the concert as well. It's far away from us for it not to be a problem with the audience. And then somebody else. And then we ended up with a tour of 5 concerts. And before I knew it, they were saying, okay, are you going to bring the CDs to sell? And of course, I'd only recorded it. I hadn't even printed the CD. And, you know, why Tenebrae? And because we sing by candlelight. There we are. You know, the literal meaning of Tenebrae is shadows. So I said, okay, oh, great. Well, yeah, it'd be wonderful to have a cathedral, you know, just bathed in candlelight. And I'm thinking, that requires candle stands. So everything was kind of done in reverse. So we then found, I found a blacksmith in a village called Chèvre, which is just on the north side of Lac Le Mans. And I said, look, could you make some little candle stands that we could travel with? And he said, yeah, I can probably knock up a few of those. And he sort of, about a week later, I went back and looked at this thing, and I said, oh, that looks rather impressive. And he said, yeah, it's about 6'6" tall, weighs 46 kilograms. I go, he said, I said, and how much are 10 of these going to cost? And so my neighbours and Valerie kind of helped go around the village, all these people saying, look, would you like to sponsor this group, this new group? And they sponsored, you know, various people sponsored each candle stand, and they had a sort of little badge on it. So before I knew it, I was kind of sort of thinking, you know, I'm in real danger of going straight back into professional music here, and you know, I just didn't know if that was really what I wanted to do. So we ploughed on, and in order to do a proper CD, they said, oh yeah, that's right. So you're going to perform by candlelight. You know, do you do anything differently? And I said, oh yeah, we move about. That's all I could think of. And then said, oh well, is there some new music, you know, on the CD? And at that point, I'd only recorded traditional Christmas carols because I thought that was all we'd have to do. And so we had about 40 minutes worth of music. We needed another 20 minutes for the CD. And I thought, what are we going to do? And I didn't want to do all the same stuff that all the other pro choirs were doing. So I thought, well, there was a chap in the village called Richard MacDonald, and he wrote a piece called The Dream of Herod, a poem. And so I thought, oh, okay, I'll set it. And it ended up being quite a dark poem. It's about whether you, the sort of reader, decide to forgive Herod, or, you know, does Herod forgive himself, or can he not forgive himself? Is that why he's tortured, or whatever? So it's kind of, you know, I think, you know, it's going to really have them whistling the tunes going back to their Christmas trees. And when I set the music, and I thought, oh gosh, it's quite gritty, it's quite edgy actually. It's not Christmassy at all, but there was loads of other nice stuff in the programme. And I showed it to a friend back in the UK who was going to record it for us, who was going to be the engineer and the producer. And he said, oh, this is rather good. So we decided to do it in all the Christmas concerts alongside the other stuff. And so we had a CD. Unbeknown to me, it got sent to Gramophone Music Magazine. The chap who ran the record company was a guy called Steve Long for Signum Records. And we made the record with them, and it got sent off. It got a fantastic review. And then we did the tour, and at the end of the tour, there's a big burly bass, you know, quite a gruff character, let's say. I won't give his name. Sort of came up to me and said, you have to do more of this. You know, we've got to do this again. So we didn't really do it. You know, I went back to skiing. I'm ashamed to say I played golf all summer. And I did another season of skiing, running the chalet. And then all these Swiss cathedrals sort of said, look, we want the choir to come back. So we had a whole tour, and it just got, more and more supporters got involved, and then we had some lady who was supporting various charities. The very first concert we did was in St Bartholomew the Great for a charity called Downside Up, which supports children suffering with Down syndrome in Russia. A guy called Charles Garrett, who was part of the British Embassy in Moscow. And so she sponsored us to turn up for this concert. And she said, I'd like some Christmas readings, so somebody's going to turn up and do that. I said, fine. Okay, got to the night, and I was there about 5 o'clock. I said, who's doing the readings? And she said, oh, Rafe Fiennes. And, you know, and the sopranos didn't look at me for the rest of the night. They sort of... so it's kind of, you know, weird how everything sort of happened the wrong way round, and we got all nice reviews, and then we're underway. And because this Dream of Herod, and it had solo roles sort of within, it was about a 20-minute cantata, it had solo roles. So the sort of singers that were on the cusp of just leaving the professional choral circuit and going into full-time solo work really had something to get their teeth into, but then that meant in the ensemble, you've got sort of weightier, sort of richer voices, but that have still got all the ensemble skills, which is really what I wanted. When we started, somebody said, you know, what's your mission statement? You know, what's your artistic vision? And I'm ashamed to say I just borrowed or pinched something from a friend of mine who was in corporate branding. And he had used something like passion and precision. And I thought, that'll do us nicely. And here we are 20 years later, he's still asking me for money for it. And the idea was that we would have the precision of, from my time in the King Singers, you know, that sort of small group that's just down to the nth degree, got all its nuts and bolts right, but with the passion of a much bigger choir like the Westminster Cathedral, you know, used to have a really big forthright sound, and that we would be able to do kind of everything, you know, in terms of dynamic range and the precision, but actually with a lot more punch. And of course, when I got them all together and we'd done a tour, and I started talking to them, you know, I never conducted anything. And I was sort of standing there in front of them, okay, what am I going to do? And I said to them, look, you know, I'm not a conductor. I'm just going to use my hands and kind of work with you as a singer, as part of the ensemble. And they sort of, you know, said, okay, fine, let's try it, see how it goes. And I remember one of the guys, Paul Badley, who's an operatic tenor, excuse me, he said, yeah, it works very well, but, you know, at times when you're getting really passionate, you hold yourself in check and you stop throwing your arms about. He said, don't. That's the best advice I think I was ever given. He said, if it's working, then do it. You know, don't let anybody say it doesn't work. If you're getting what you want, then do it. And if it comes naturally, that's the best thing you can hope for. Rather than, you know, these days I go to America a lot and work with, you know, conducting students, and they're doing their diplomas and all the rest of it, and they've been taught they must, you know, all their beats must come within this sort of imaginary triangle or a rectangle, and they can never go out of that. They mustn't mouth the words. So if you're singing, you know, to a choir that they're about to sing the word love and you want something a bit extra, I can't go, I have to go. And it's sort of counterintuitive, really. So it was the best advice, and it saved me an awful lot of money because I didn't go for any conducting lessons. I did, actually, when I had to conduct an orchestra. I thought, no, I can't get up in front of any orchestra and pretend I know what I'm doing. I mean, I still don't, but at least I'm honest with the orchestras and say I'm a choral conductor, I'm a singer, and normally, you know, the leaders will look at you and go, okay, fine, we understand that. You know, just breathe with them, and their up bow is your breath, and they completely get it. And you know, orchestras, I think, probably tend to make life rather difficult for people who stand there and pretend to be, you know, wonderful orchestral maestros when they're not. So honesty is the best policy, and then they're kind to me, especially if I let them finish early. So anyway, that's kind of how Tenebrae all came about. And, you know, with all the different programs, when we decided that it was going to be a kind of full-time thing, for me anyway, we don't have enough work for the freelance singers to be full-time, we got some management, again, some neighbours in Switzerland. I ended up staying in Switzerland for 4 years because these neighbours and Valerie were just so brilliant at sort of supporting whatever we wanted to do. And they got somebody who worked for us and then looked for concerts, and then we found ourselves going to all sorts of festivals all over the UK, and then it just got bigger and bigger. And of course, every festival, you know, that their directors have a favourite kind of choral music in their mind, or they have a theme, and you just have to be very flexible and very creative about what you create for them. Hopefully not making a rod for your own back, in that you come up with a brilliant, wonderfully adventurous program that absolutely no singer knows, and you've got a day to rehearse it and put the whole thing together. Otherwise, that is terrifying for them and me. But over 20 years, you know, we've now got a huge repertoire, which does, you know, starts from the 11th century with Peritan, goes all the way through to new contemporary works. We just did our 20th anniversary programme, Humanity and Liberty, in Lammermuir Festival in Scotland, and that's got 2 new commissions, one from Roddy Williams called Lucis Creator, which again actually is designed to start a concert and finish a concert. It sort of bookends the programme, but it's designed to get the choir on from the wings, so the audience doesn't see us. It just hears this sort of whispering, and then the choir gradually move one by one. And because we haven't actually managed to do it yet, we've sung it, but because of the COVID restrictions, we just sort of come on stage and go, "Lucis," and then everyone's going, "Why are they whispering?" So hopefully it'll make sense one day soon. And then there's another fabulous piece called "Into the Wreck" by a composer, a brilliant young composer, Josephine Stevenson. It's a collection of Emily Dickin's poems, and she's added other writings, ancient Greek, some Japanese, Swedish things. I mean, the language in it is tricky. We spent a long time trying to get it all right. We'll get there one day, but so we're kind of doing lots of different things, even now, trying to find new ways to present concerts and commission more and more works. Kind of lost my thread, but anyway. So that's where we are at the moment. Any other? It was a good question, thank you. That kept me going for a while, didn't it?
Good evening, Nigel. Do you have an active recruitment policy? And as a rider to that, how do you separate the sheep from the goats?
Do we have a process for people to join the choir, and how do I choose one person from the next? I'll leave the bestiality out of it. We do, I mean, essentially, anybody can come and audition. You know, I'm happy to hear absolutely anybody, and so the auditions are totally open. Because of the nature of what we do, it's not simply a case of just singing your songs. It's very much, you have to be an ensemble animal, sorry, back to the animals. But that ensemble skill has to be pretty instinctive. Because I don't want to do all the music just on the end of a beat, like a conductor. I want to sort of be, I want to be malleable with it. When we're really on form, that's the most exciting time. And I warn singers that I might try something different in the concert that we've not done in rehearsal. When an ensemble is really working at its very highest level, then everybody's listening out for anything that might happen and reacts to it. And that's a wonderfully exciting way of performing music, because it's kind of live for us, rather than, you know, you've rehearsed everything here, yes, we breathe there, that's fine, but it's not really being in the moment as performers. And of course, when singers come along and they sing to me, I find out if they've got a nice voice. We give them sight reading tests, and they're normally pretty fierce because we don't have a lot of rehearsal time. it's a blessing and a curse, really, that British choirs and orchestras are such fantastic sight readers, because I think over a period of time, it's meant that the economics of people that are paying for the concerts have managed to, get the groups down to an absolute minimum, and it kind of forces us to do sometimes a concert on only one rehearsal or maybe two rehearsals. In Europe, you simply wouldn't have that. Choirs and orchestras will get together for a whole week. They'll immerse themselves in the music, and I think that's it's a good thing to do. So I hear whether the singers have got a good voice, whether they sing in tune. Sight reading test, fine. Still doesn't actually tell me what I need to know, which is once they're standing in the line, do they work well with other singers? Are they malleable with their sound? Are they flexible? Are they one of these singers that has a fantastic voice? Done wonderful lessons. They come along, and then there's a piece of music. Oh, yeah, that's the sound I've been taught to make. Oh, and then another composer comes out. Oh, yeah, it's a great sound. Another piece of music. Oh, and I'm kind of not interested in that. It might be a wonderful sound, and it might be absolutely perfect for one kind of music, but it's not going to be right for everything. And I really want the instinctive ensemble musicians who will put their voices at the service of the music and of the composer, not the other way around, where your voice is really, you and your voice are the central thing, and there's a conveyor belt of composers and their music coming along, and it goes through the mincer, and it all comes out sounding exactly the same. Because otherwise I think concerts would be rather dull. You'd have a choir just sounding exactly the same, no matter what century music they're singing. And because of the minimal rehearsal time we have, a lot of that needs to be unspoken. It's got to be instinctive. And if somebody sort of sets off on a piece, in a way that is totally out of character, then they might get the eyebrow from me, sort of going, are you really going to do it like that? When there was a time when we auditioned people, and we would get them in for 2 or 3 concerts, put them in, and generally put them in at the deep end. Wouldn't give them easy programs. Because why? If you're going to use them, they've got to be able to cope with it, and they've got to be able to cope with the pressure and the travel, all that. And then you have a conflab with the senior singers, and they will tell me, I'll have a pretty good idea, but maybe sometimes somebody isn't quite so good at that, but has got potential. And that's really key for me, is that when the youngsters come along, if they've got a wonderful voice, if we think the potential is there to bring on their ensemble skills, then that's what we must do, and that's what these associate artists are all about. And sometimes, we're lucky. Most of them have done a lot of choral singing and singing groups even before they get to us. But we have had some that haven't, but they come along, and I just know that I want that colour of voice in a certain section of the choir. And so I just get the other people in that part around them and say, okay, this is a journey. It's going to take us a while to get there. And, we have somebody at the moment, the baritone, who's not actually singing with us tonight. He's stuck in Jersey, where he lives. And he was a chorister at St George's Windsor, and he has a beautiful baritone voice. But by his own admission, when we first put him in the lineup, he was kind of like a rabbit in headlights, and was kind of, it's taken time. But he has, he's over 2 years, he's sort of gone from that stage to now, when the seniors are not there, he is leading other singers in all the right ways, not just singing loudly. And it's brilliant to see, how the youngsters are brought on just by the experience, being immersed in it. So that's kind of how, we separate the ones that we think are going to be right for us. Hope that's useful. Hello.
With regard to the malleability and flexibility of the choir, which I totally understand, there always exists this extraordinary dynamic between performers and audience. There was a quartet here a few years ago, and they were talking about how they came onto the stage totally prepared, and then found themselves playing
Well, there are venues where the acoustic changes. You know, when we were in a church somewhere in Dinard in France, and this place had a 5-second echo, and we had a glorious rehearsal. And when we got there, there was a queue going out the back of the abbey, the abbatiale, and we went in there and said, "How many people are in there?" And they said, "Oh, about 1,200. And I walked in there and we thought, wow, this is exciting. And we sang the first piece and went, hang on, you know, who's drawn the curtains and put the carpet out? And the acoustic had just totally disappeared. And we'd separated the singers out, sort of knowing they could they could work in the empty space. And we had to just adapt on a sixpence, you know, in terms of pacing, all the rest of it. So that's more to do with the interaction with the venue. But with the audience, yeah, I mean, we tend to be so focused on what we're doing. I mean, I would say more often than not, I forget an audience is there because the audience is so quiet and it's so sort of focused on the focus that's hit, the sort of invisible focus of us working very intensely. And that seems to draw audiences in a very exciting way. And my in-laws go to a lot of concerts and they say that there's something very strange but different about Tenebrae concerts to all the others that they go to, because at the end of a piece or whatever, they say, we don't feel we can breathe until the choir actually goes like this. So they're drawn in with us into that space. But it's not something we set out to do. I think it just happens. I mean, sometimes you can be aware of an audience in a different way, where you know there are distractions, or the acoustics just mean that you know I can hear the audience, everything that's going on, as well as they can hear us, which is not always ideal. It means you know you can get distracted. You know, if phones are going off. How often do phones go off in concerts? You know, you always get announcements, don't you? But they still go off. So, I mean, yeah, it's not something, you know, we're not trying to get laughs, I suppose, or like the King Singers would. You want that kind of interaction in their light music. But for us, when we're performing, it's a case of doing something that is so special that people want to hear, you know, that they can see that we're working hard and they are drawn in. And then they're kind of involved, and we know that. Sometimes the singers say, you know, God, I could just sense that people are zoned in a great way, and that's what we want. Pleasure. I've had somebody sort of for the last 5 minutes doing this, so I'm sorry I've talked for so long. But good. I think that's the end of it then. If you've got any other questions, tough. Yes, we've still got the candlesticks. They're all in my garage. Yeah, my heart sinks these days when the manager says, and they'd like you to take 4 candlesticks. They're jolly heavy, and they come apart. They were designed that the crowns just lift off. Then you've got a stand and a screw-in stem. So they're brilliant for travelling, but they're 46 kilos each. So, and I slipped 2 discs in 2002, and you know, normally we don't have the money for somebody to carry them around, so I have to do them myself. And every time, you know, the manager's sort of going, oh no, Nigel's, you know, about to walk on stage sort of like this and start conducting. So I have to be careful. But no, we do. Anyway, I think that's it. So thank you.